Hey, hello, and welcome to this pedestrian space hosted roundtable featuring Punit Gandhi, who is based in New Delhi and is a senior associate with the Climate Center for Cities C-Cube at the National Institute of Urban Affairs. He works at the intersection of climate change and urban development and believes that decentralization of climate actions will help in better adoption of solutions. In his current job, he is building the Climate Practitioners India Network, CPIN, which aims at developing a solutions-oriented citizen engagement platform for citizens across India on climate change. He also hosts a podcast called Understanding the Future, where he interviews experts on the future of cities and the future of work. He has worked on policy development for the government of India, as well as the implementation of the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework across 126 cities, impacting 140 million people in urban India. He has a master's in sustainable energy technology from the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands, and has also worked for 4 years in the field of rooftop solar PV system installation. Thank you for being here, Punit. Punit is also, I'm happy to say, a member of our Global Walkability Correspondence Network representing New Delhi. So I'm very glad to have you in the network and your expertise. We love having these roundtables featuring guests, featuring correspondents. You are both. To learn more about, I'm fascinated to hear more about your network. You have a 1,000-member strong network across India working on solutions-oriented citizen engagement. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And after a little bit of hearing about your background, we'll open up to a Q&A from participants.
Thank you so much, Annika. I'm glad that you could invite me over here and I could share whatever I have in my bag with everyone over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to start maybe just with who you are and where you are to begin with.
Sure. So, hello everyone. I'm Punit Gandhi. I am from India and I currently stay in New Delhi. I am from a town called, not a town, but now it's more of a big city called Surat and in Gujarat, which is on the western coast of India. And I have had the pleasure of living across multiple cities through transition. So I've lived in one more city called Vadodara. I have lived in the Delft, Netherlands for my master's. I was able to live in Pondicherry for 9 to 10 months after my master's to do internships, and Mumbai before moving to Delhi. So I would say that I've had an experience of multiple cities before I moved to this city. Yeah, climate change is something that I'm passionate about, and that's where I started studying the field of sustainable energy technology during my master's, which led me to work a lot more on energy industry before shifting with the failure of that company that I had started in renewable energy sector. I shifted to urban development sector through a fellowship called Smart Cities Mission Fellowship. And it's been now 3.5 years that I've been working at the in the urban development sector, and almost 2.5 years at the intersection of climate change and urban development sector. And it's been an amazing ride. And I will not say that I know urban development pretty well, but I can say that I have had opportunity to talk to all different kinds of experts in this field. And that surely has helped me understand urban development in a much better way. So yeah, that's something briefly about me.
Okay, great. And to expand more on the where, I'd like to go into the Climate Practitioners India Network. Maybe we could start hearing about that and what that is.
Sure. So Climate Practitioners India Network started as a thought process to, so being a government organization, we have been in touch with all different kinds of implementation organization, academic organization, multilaterals, bilaterals possible. And what we realized we lacked was to close the loop was citizen engagement. We were not doing that. And that is somewhere where we thought that we should start engaging with cities to understand what is actually required. And that is when we will be able to complete a framework called quadruple helix, which is your academia, organizations, government, and citizens coming together to develop any kind of solutions. So most of our work at Climate Center for Cities aligned around implementing Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, which was developed by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs by Government of India. And when we were doing that, citizens became a point where we wanted to interact with them, but we did not have avenues to do it. And that's where we started something called as Climate Practitioners India Network. And yeah, we are now more than 750 people strong, hoping to reach 1,000, 1,500 by end of this year. And the idea is that we already have around 100 cities on board, people from 100 cities. So idea is to make sure now that with the number of cities increasing, we also want to increase the number of people in each city so that they can form communities and groups at local level to be able to implement different climate actions, and which I believe is also an important part of developing the narrative of, yes, you do need policies, you do need finances, you do need technology, but then you need will. Will is where that comes from the community, from citizens on ground, and that is the idea. And so when we started it off, I think it's almost a year now that we started out this network. We have now co-created the vision of it as well, that we understood somewhere that, okay, we want to start this thing, but how do we sustain it? How do we make sure that we can get maximum benefit out of it? So everyone in the network can get maximum benefit out of it. So we did a round of consultations initially just to understand what do people want, how do they see such a network developing, how can the network help them as well, and things like that. And we co-created the vision and objective, and that's where we came up with that. What we will do is support the development of an engagement platform. That's it. Let people decide what they want to do. Let them amplify whatever knowledge they have. Let them take up or seek support from anyone, because there are people from all different kinds of background that have joined in the network, and everyone has worked on something or the other in a climate sector or would like to work on it. So they have interacted with other citizens, other organizations, or government as well, and they have faced challenges, they have solved the challenge. So we want this network to act as a sort of knowledge in itself, that today, let's say you come up with a problem statement that, okay, you want to solve this thing, and this is the problem you are facing while solving this thing. We are hoping someone from other city might be able to help you, or it might be from your city, from other cities, so that it's easier for you to find solutions and you don't have to go and find, okay, I am specifically stuck to this problem. So that way, this network will help them develop solutions which are more implementable, solutions which will cater to their needs. And that is where we are focusing on with CPIN, that how do we do that? How can we maximize that and make sure there is first increased engagement internally inside the group so that everyone benefits from the group. And once they benefit, they will in turn call more and more people to join the group, because now they want to increase the network on their own to be able to get solutions from more variety of people. So that's the kind of intent we have with this, and that's how we are trying to scale it up as well.
Okay, really interesting. Can you backtrack to the very beginning of the network, when it was founded and what that establishment looked like and how it has changed over time?
Oh, sure. That's a pretty interesting journey in itself, because we were implementing the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework. Now, that's a framework which has 5 different thematic areas of urban development. If I have to broadly say, I'll just give a background context to it, that what we are doing, so that it helps people understand this in a better way. So the idea, the 5 thematic areas that we look into is energy and green building, urban planning, clean cover, and biodiversity, mobility and air quality, waste management, and water management. Now, these are the broad line objectives of any urban local body in the city that anyone is living in India. And when we are looking at it, our basic intent was that we want to develop or build climate actions in cities. And to do that, we wanted to make sure that the uh, people employed in this urban local body understand what is climate change and what are their daily functions that they can do to make sure that they are working towards the climate change. And so let it be someone in water department or in waste department, they would understand, okay, if we do this, this is how it will benefit us. And that's what we wanted them to realize, as well as work towards it. So while doing that, we have now as a center developed somewhere close to 26 different training modules for city officials or people working in the urban local body. And we train them specifically on those lines that, okay, this is how you can work on your day to day. You can try to get projects around these lines in your field to make sure that you're working towards urban development in a way that is more climate focused. And the idea being that we are not saying that this will absolutely reduce climate change, but we are saying that you will be better prepared if with adaptation as well as mitigation aspects of it. And there are 28 different indicators around these lines, and we collect almost 96 data points from each city on these parameters. So when we were doing this, we did not always. So we have a good group of organizations who support us in collecting data as well, because capacity constraints at local level is generally a big hassle for us to get data. And we realized that there were at least 10 to 15 cities where we could not find any organizations who could help us collect data. And that was the point where we were like, can we reach out to citizens over there who are experienced in this field and who can help us help the local bodies to collect data? That was the initial thought process that we came up with, that, okay, but we currently don't have anything. How do we do it? So I did think with my colleagues, my peers, and somewhere it was on the line that we can maybe, as of now, approach people just to reach out, that if you are working in this field and are available, we can have a 2 or 3 month consultation contract with you that we can do, and things like that. But it was very difficult to pan it out. So when the assessment ended and we had results, that is when we started that, okay, now let's start something that before the next assessment starts, we have a group of citizens across India who can help us out with that. And when we started that off, the first thing we realized is that, and before starting as well, we reached out to multiple organizations who have developed communities to be able to sustain, and specifically the disaster communities work on those things. Whenever a disaster strikes, these communities come together quickly, help out with solutions, help out with mapping of the whole area, everything. So they are generally inactive unless and until disaster strikes. They come on ground and do things on their own. And that was something which fascinated us. But that was a bigger challenge. Now we have a disaster at hand with climate change that will come in their city, but we don't know. And we want to now make sure that the people are continuously engaged so that they feel that they are part of the community. That is where we thought that, okay, what we want out of the community is one part of it, but we can't base the development of community on that. And that is where we had to backtrack. We had to give it back to the citizens that, okay, what do you want? And that is where all the consultation meetings started with the citizens itself, whoever became part of the community. That, okay, we have formed a network. Now we need your help to understand what do you want out of this network. And that is how we co-created the whole vision and objective. And now we have come to the point where we are planning out events on monthly basis. We are planning out research and compendiums on quarterly or something around those lines. And as well as we have now informal subgroups that people can directly connect to. We are thinking about developing communities on Discord uh, and all sorts of different activities that can be taken up by the community and make it people-led. We don't want to be that, okay, this is how we will drive it. We want people to drive it. So the whole agenda now has become towards how can we make all these events in a way that people take up leads, people take it forward, and people utilize it in a way that they benefit from it. Because unless and until they benefit from something on their own, they are not going to use it on their own. So while it's a free community, anyone can join it. In a community, generally the biggest challenge is that people will not take up initiatives. So that is our biggest challenge that we are facing right now, and that's what we are trying to solve right now.
I'm curious to hear more about that, but I want to backtrack and just ask you if you could slowly repeat the 5 schematic areas. Somebody asked if we could mention the schematic areas in the chat. I thought if you could just go over those 5 again, so we could all note them down.
Sure. So the 5 thematic areas that we work around is energy and green building, your urban planning, green cover and biodiversity, mobility and air quality, water management, and waste management.
Okay, so energy and green building, water management, yes. Waste management, urban planning.
Yes, green cover and biodiversity.
Green power and biodiversity.
Cover. So green your cover. Tree covered, yeah.
Green cover and biodiversity are one area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Urban planning, green cover, and biodiversity in total is a one area.
Okay. All right, and back to the network. So when was it established?
Most like I think it was in July of 2021. I don't remember the exact date, but sometime it's been 1 year now. Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. The biggest challenge is people taking up initiatives. So what are some of the interesting moments you're seeing that, for example, in our network, the Global Walkability Correspondence Network, I would say the opportunity to take initiative. So if people are struggling and want to get involved or feel a leadership role, I always say a way to lead is take ownership of a working group. Or if you don't see any that you want to work with, create one. You will no doubt have people joining. So for me, that's been a learning moment in terms of offering space for people to take initiative. So have you seen those moments in your network? I'm sure you've seen many, but what are some examples?
No, absolutely. So we have kind of curated ways in which we have tried to understand what do people. So even with the kind of small groups that you are talking about, that's what we want to do with the informal subgroups. And I think I will give that idea back to you itself, that because being part of this network, I realized that something like this can also be curated for here, but the functioning over here becomes quite different because here anyone can join the group, anyone can go out of the group, it's their call. But at the same time, when someone's interested, helping them understand how can they leverage this, because being a new group, people I feel are more scared to take initiatives on their own. It's not that the people don't have initiation or leadership thing, it's just that they don't know what to do. So that is why we have, so just before this call, we had a call on, I'm leading, so to start off, and for me to understand as well, I'm leading one of the groups called Climate Communications. The idea being that how do you communicate about climate? Because that's one of the most complex challenges. Yes, as a technical person, I know all different kinds of problems that happen. How can I solve them? But how do I communicate it to people is a bigger challenge in itself, because not everyone is adopting new ways of doing things. So, and we have seen a good sustained interest of, we had one round of meeting, today was the second meeting, and I got a new co-lead as well who was interested in leading this group. So that way it's helping me also that we can do things in a better way in itself. And I'm also realizing that, okay, whenever we ask a question, people want to introduce themselves, people want to talk about their work, but for them to take up initiative, not everyone is willing. And you will see that while in conversations that there'll be 2 or 3 people in a group of 30 people who might be interested in taking up any initiatives. So kind of hand holding them that, okay, can you do something like this? We'll support you. Can you do something like this? We'll support you. And that was a point somewhere as well that we realized that we independently can't do everything. The group can have a lot many more things, but we need more people who can do such things. And that is where, when we want to make it people-led, we'll need people from the network itself who are doing these. So that is where we started CPIN volunteers program. The idea was volunteers was that now we have selected, we defined from all the conversations we have had with during consultation, that we defined certain activities that we can do now. And now every month on month, we want people to talk about new fields, and especially people who are already from that field. So the July, we have one on air quality, and that will be the first event that the volunteers will be doing. And the idea is that they will bring experts from the community itself, whoever is working in air quality, have a panel discussion on that, and then bring back the conversation to the table, open for everyone who's on the call. That what are the things that are possible? Why are they possible? What are the different challenges? Everything. So that will make sure that there is enough knowledge sharing that starts happening. And this is where I think community development requires long patience time, and that is something I have realized with time, that okay, I'll have to give so much of time and energy, and for that volunteers are now helping me out to make sure that they can support and take up leads on doing everything. We have to guide them on how to do it, but once they start doing it, they will somewhere also help another 5 people take up certain more initiatives. And this is how we are going to slowly build up the network, which is stronger, which is more on the lines of implement and working towards implementation. That is one of the key aspects that we want to focus on. That you can have all the theories possible, but how are we implementing it is one of the key things that we want to look forward to.
I have one more question for you, and then maybe we'll turn it over to Q&A. I am really fascinated to hear more about your climate communications group, because Pedestrian Space is a media and advocacy platform, and issues of walkability, our mobility choices, the mobility, sustainable mobility, the mobility paradigm, car dependence, all of this, and how it connects to obviously environment and climate issues is a big focus. And being a media platform, we're communicating all the time and very interested in citizen engagement. So I'm thinking maybe we should just have you for another roundtable later this year, focusing specifically on what is climate communication. I really find that fascinating, but maybe you can save most of it for the roundtable later this year, if you're willing to. But maybe just a little brief, a little snippet about what is climate communications and what your group is working with.
Sure. So one thing that we have done with subgroups is we have given independence to people of what they want out of it. We are not trying to define that this is the exact things that you need to do, or this is how you need to. It is more of a thought, that an idea that you meet people who are interested in similar things. So we have had queries and interest on people wanting to work on circular economy, people wanting to work on SDGs, climate finance, and I'm hoping some people have shown interest in taking up the lead, and they will take up the lead. But that being said, when I'm talking about climate communications, we have had meetings where we have discussed all different kind of things people have done to showcase how can you communicate change about climate change in different ways. And for me, that also started with my journey with podcast. Uh, that was first a learning for me. That okay, when you look at it from different lenses, how does climate change go? How does it impact people? And what can be done to move forward around that? And as mentioned, that yes, climate change in the chat box, that climate change is a very big topic. When we talk about climate change, so when you talk about it in India, there's always one disaster happening somewhere or the other in the country. It will start with as soon as summer kicks in, it will start with heat wave in certain parts. Then rainy season comes and there's flooding in other parts. Then your winter season comes in and then there's flooding in other parts of the country where you have rainy season at the end of the year. And then there is ice at some spots. So the disaster keeps on happening. And when we try to bring it under climate change umbrella, no one realizes that they have been facing those disasters year on year and taking action on it. It's just that they face this issue, all of a sudden they forget about it, and then they face another issue and they forget about it because a third issue has come up. So the idea is that, yes, it's a very broad and diverse topic. And it's not easy to communicate everyone that this is what climate change is. But can we develop ways? So someone has worked on, and a lot of people have been working on, different initiatives on ground where they have been collecting trash from the beaches or rivers and lakes and asking people to segregate waste, reduce air pollution, don't burn things down in the open area and stuff like that. And those are the kind of activities we are looking at, that what has worked and what has not worked right now. The idea being that once we start defining those things, so one person came up with a really interesting thing that they had done in one of the Indian cities. I think it's an international organization which does this kind of activities called Gigaton Challenge. And it was one of the most unique ideas I saw that anyone shared, that the idea is that today, as a person, can you reduce 1 kg of carbon in the first week, 10 kg in the next week, 100 kgs in a week after that, and slowly move towards 1,000 kgs, 10,000 kgs, and that is when you start involving more and more people on it. And you start helping them understand, why are you taking part in this challenge? How will this challenge help them? And what kind of actions can they do to, reduce the emissions? So while it sounds very bizarre, but something like that on community scale can do wonders in helping people understand how can they work towards it. What are the daily things that they can do that can help them in a better way to understand climate change, mitigate it, and adapt to it. So somewhere that is the kind of thought process and focus we also need to bring from the communications perspective, that how can implementation be at the core of the focus when we're looking at any kind of plan that we want to develop? Because unless and until that is there, it's very difficult for people to realize just in theory that you can't always keep that narrative. And this always comes up that polar bears are not getting space to live because ice caps are melting. It's changed now. It's affecting you in everyday life. How can you change your surroundings in a better way that it does not affect you? Is what now we have to come towards. And this is where we are trying to develop. We currently don't have any objective or a target of what we are trying to achieve, but somewhere we are trying to develop it slowly and slowly. And today only we were discussing that we might start off with a survey, try to understand all different kinds of challenges people are facing, and maybe pick 2 out of it, which affects most number of people. Start with that, or start with regional chapters around those lines. But let's see, we'll start with some kind of a survey to understand different kinds of challenges that majority of the people are facing.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So when we circle back later this year, we'll maybe hear about that survey. So this has been great, and we're going to be hearing a lot more from you. And I'd like to maybe now open it up. We have several participants here. We have several participants from India, one from Spain, one from Iran. So let's open it up here to questions. If you're not comfortable speaking, please feel free to drop questions in the chat or just raise your hand.
Hey, Punit. I have a question. Of the thematic areas that you mentioned, right? I'm curious to learn what climate action means for water management and waste management as areas. Is this something that can be participated in and tackled at an individual level, or is this something that's supposed to be a more organizational change?
So that's a pretty good question, and there are multiple layers to it. So let me come from a bit top down to help where each and every sector person can come into picture. So when we look at it from the urban local bodies or municipal corporations in any cities, we are looking at it on the lines that how can we make sure the water supplied to anyone in the city is supplied in the most efficient manner. When a city is transporting water from 400, 500 kilometers away from a lake, it is, putting in energy to get that much of water first. So unless and until you have good groundwater reserves, lakes, rivers inside the city, you might be doing that. And a lot of Indian cities do that as well. And to be honest, it's not always bad that you might need it, because now there is a settlement here, the water resource is there, and you need a dedicated line for it, and that's fine. So are those then pumps efficient? If pumps are efficient, are they working on renewable energy, or are you offsetting it with renewable energy to make sure that, yes, it's an efficient source? And before that, it also comes to the point that are you then promoting something like rainwater harvesting in the city so that your groundwater table increases so that you don't have to face a lot of issues? This comes from the point of view of when water is coming in, but then there is a point where water is going out as well. And when we look at it from the perspective, is the water being treated before it is going back to the rivers? How is it treated? What kind of energy usage is taking place? And is that coming from renewable energy again? Because unless and until there is a network that does that, you're going to waste a lot of water. And most probably, if you're just throwing it out, it might be contaminate your soil as well at certain parts, which can cause more disease. So from climate action perspective, somewhere also then reducing the non-revenue water is very important, because then your systems from consumption to wastage are more efficient. So, and people, it is being accounted for. They are not just leakages of water. They are, you might charge for it or not charge for it, but non-revenue water will somewhere lead to, you're putting in a lot of funding from external sources to be able to just provide water and treat it without getting any kind of. Now, when we come to the community level of it, it starts with, now there is a rule that most of the, and specifically in Chennai, there is that you need to develop water harvesting system. You need to have STPs if there is an apartment complex. Sewage treatment plants in the apartment complex if you have 500,000 people living over there. The idea being that if it is treated there and then itself, you're reducing the wastage that it will cause. the wastewater that comes out of it can now be reused and recycled for your own surroundings. And that's what you want to do. And that's where, and it's not that only one person doing it will be helpful. It then goes to the intent of, is everyone in that locality doing it or not? Because unless and until all 100 people are doing such things, or 100 houses are doing rainwater harvesting, your water table is not going to increase. So those are the things that we need to look at it from person perspective. And then this is how you can divide. I'm sure there are multiple other things that I'm missing out, but I think this can be a start of it.
Got it. Thank you for that elaborate answer. Actually, I think it gave me some perspective to understand.
Okay.
Urmi, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hello. Actually, the question Gautam asked is a classic example of how a layperson struggles to understand a complex subject like climate change. It's, you know, and Gautam is a professional in this network, and I'm talking about people who don't even have that kind of a professional background. So it's classic. How does waste management and water management affect climate? So, but these are some things that need to be broken down into the very basics for every householder to understand that the action they take in their house has, you know, a cascading effect that ultimately impacts the climate. Whether you choose to ride your bicycle or drive your car to work, whether you save water by changing your fixtures and taps in your bathroom, and that water save means the, you know, the purification, the water supply network has to use, as Punit said, less energy to produce and distribute that water. The waste that you generate at the household level, if it's not managed properly, if there is no proper garbage collection or management, then it gets dumped in, it happens in India very commonly, that it gets dumped. I'm from Assam, Guwahati. So there is no proper waste recycling plan. So wetlands are seen as, you know, leftover spaces where garbage can be dumped by municipality, not even by the lay person. But what happens with that garbage is that, first of all, it's decreasing the extent of the wetlands. And as you know, wetlands have a climate cooling effect. It can keep your surroundings up to 2 degrees cooler. But that is the most obvious thing. The less obvious things are the plastics. Over time, they deteriorate into microplastics. They are eaten by fish. And that fish is consumed by people, and that plastic that gets disintegrated again, that emits carbon. It gets back into the atmosphere. So these are very technical, very, you know, complex systems that are at play, which at the household level people are not aware of. So when I was in Australia working for the local government there, a few councils, we got together to develop a climate action tool that every household, they can generate their own climate action plan based on where they are. They just have to select their location from drop-down menu. The rainfall and other, you know, climate-related characteristics are then automatically applied, and it generates a plan for your specific geographic location as to what are the little things you can do. Instead of using the dryer, which is not thankfully used much in India, dry your clothes in the sun, which is, of course, it's done in India. But apart from things like that, which are really simple, one thing that is happening is discarding the use of single-use plastic, which is a good step in that direction. But these are things that are happening ad hoc. So when I raise the question to, it's not a question, it's more of a statement to Punit, that you are trying to reach out to the grassroots level, to communities. I think a good way of doing that is there are disparate different groups working on thematic areas. Like in Guwahati, I know there is a very active group that is promoting sustainable transport modes. There are wetland friends of wetlands groups, but they don't know, they don't connect with each other. They don't know that they are contributing to climate mitigation and adaptation. Their actions are leading to it. Or even if they know, they don't know how to bring that forward, have that as a more of a, how do I translate that into actionable things. They are aware of it, but they don't know how to make everybody aware of that issue and take up those behavioral change at the grassroots level. That is what you are after. I think for you, it's a very difficult task sitting in Delhi, trying to reach out to a vast country like India with very different climate impacts in different parts. Northeast is a very vulnerable area, and you're seeing the disasters right now, from flood, landslides to all kinds of disasters are happening. And everybody is talking, yeah, it's climate change, but what can you do about it? Nobody has an answer to it. So I hope your work cascades down to that level and brings about some concrete change.
So I do agree, and I absolutely agree with your thought over there. I'll say that, and we are trying now. So with the group itself, so we have selected 10 volunteers, out of which now 4 are going to work on research and things, and we are trying to develop a compendium or repository of sorts where it's called Clicks, and the idea being that citizens or community-led initiatives in climate and sustainability. We are trying to compile, and it's going to be a research which is going to be crowdsourced. So we also don't know what the result will be, honestly, yet. But the idea being that we want to compile all different kinds of activities being done by citizens or communities across India in all different cities on every different aspect. So whatever we can map, we are trying to map. We will be mapping, we will be reaching out to all different kinds of organizations, all different kinds of networks to be able to spread the awareness so that people can post about what work they are doing or what work someone is doing that they know of and things like that. This will just help us understand how are people taking up actions, first of all. Another is what are the different challenges they are facing, and especially with government, because a lot of times citizen actions that comes up in any picture requires some amount of government support or local government, local mayor, something or the other on those lines, that everyone trying to clean up a beach every weekend, they can clean it up, but after that, someone needs to dispose that waste off. So unless and until the local government comes into picture and picks up the waste, cleaning that waste from the beach is not going to help. And making sure that that waste goes to a good segregation site and not the landfill site as well. So those are the things that needs to be taken into account. So that is the idea, that we are also one of the intent that we have with doing that kind of research is what are the different challenges they face? Have they solved those challenges, and how did they solve? So trying to understand their processes on it. The idea again being that when we look at urban centers or urban areas in general, our assumption is there are maximum 10 to 15 different actions a citizen can take. Maybe 20, I don't know. We are also yet to find it out. But the idea is that something will be on waste, something will be on pedestrianization, something will be on water management, energy, and all these broad categories. In that, you might have 1 to 2 solutions each in terms of how can an action be taken by a citizen or community out there. Now, you then map out in which region, what are the different kinds of challenges people are facing, so that anyone now in a different city wants to start something of those sorts, they have that these are the problems they might face, and these are the ways that people have solved it. Can they follow the same solution in their surroundings or not? If not, what did they follow? And maybe we will create a second round of it where they discuss that this is how we solve this problem. So that will act as a repository of sorts for people to understand that wherever they want to take up any action, of 10, 15, 20, the limited number of actions that any citizen or community can take in their surroundings. How can they take it? How can they implement it? What kind of challenges they will face? And how can they solve those challenges? And if need be, they can connect to similar groups across the region or across the country to be able to take support, build narratives, build movements out of it, whatever it is, to make sure that they have enough things, substantial data around it as well, so that when data then starts coming in, you have some sort of impact. Now, I know this is way too aspirational and this has just started. So, but this is the thought process behind the start, that we are hoping that something like this can evolve out of it.
Hey, I have more questions now because the discussion is getting interesting. I guess I have two questions. So the first question is probably a simpler one, so I'll start with that. Is there some sort of a bridge between your organization and the smart cities mission, which
Yes.
I do understand it? They have much more leverage, I guess, in terms of being able to encourage governments to collect data and then do something with that data. So yeah, what is the nature of the relationship that your organization
We are part
enjoys?
of Smart Cities mission.
Okay.
We are
Okay.
an offshoot of Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework is part of Smart Cities mission.
Okay.
And apart from that, there are at least 4 different kinds of assessment that are part of Smart Cities mission, and we all combine together to give Smart Cities mission a bunch of data that it uses to go forward.
Got it. So then my second question is, and I guess we're playing hypothetically here, but it's some case study that I'm remembering as you're talking. I don't remember where it's from, somewhere in Europe, but I learned that in order to encourage citizens to use less energy, and so this probably falls under the energy vertical, they, along with the energy bill that they would get, they would also publish something along the lines of, this is the average energy used in your street. And so it just lets you know, are you increasing the average or are you decreasing the average? And it kind of lets you know where you stand. And that's just taking the data that's already available and then figuring out an idea of where do you input that data. And so I think that's a behavioral change solution as well, because it's a very small nudge that's coming from an emotional angle. So let's say now I heard about this idea. I think it's great. What is the mechanism, or what is the process for seeing let's call them best practices, seeing best practices somewhere, and then actually working it into some sort of a mandate? I don't know if policy or mandate are too strong of words, but what is the way that an idea can go from just being one person thinking, I think that would be great if we had something like that, to it actually manifesting?
I agree with you, and this is one of the complex things that starts coming in when you are in a government organization. And I think this is with time we have also realized that. So when you talk about, while energy as a consumption format comes under Smart Cities mission, not directly but indirectly, because I can't control how much electricity you're using. I can probably only from the, and this is the complexity of India per se as well. I will put it that way, that the amount of functions that any urban local body or municipal corporation has is defined by the state, that which state gives you how much of power to do how much of things. Now, electricity departments are governed by different state departments. There is already less amount of conversation between one department, any one department, let alone be connecting with another department, either in the same body or outside of that body. That becomes a much more complex system. So I agree, and I would like to also see that, okay, you have an idea and you want to implement it. How do you do it? It's a tough call. Maybe you can, and that is where somewhere distributed actions kind of help. That maybe start doing an activity. And that is why it takes a long time and process to do or implement such kind of change. There is no simple way in which this can be done. And it's not that this example people over here don't know. The Joint Secretary at the ministry gives this example. And we have heard from him this so many times. So it's not that they don't know, but the amount of power that they have as well is limited to an extent that they can't influence something like this. That now they can't influence it in power ministry, that can you start doing this at pin code levels or something on those lines. So this is the challenge. This is one of the biggest challenge that organizations and government organizations have. With it's not even transparency or anything, but it's more on the lines of systems are so complex and built in such a way that data flow becomes very complex in general. So to be honest, when a municipal corporation takes out an app where you can do all the municipal services on an app, and now that is available in quite a lot of Indian cities, and this is one of the biggest boon of digitization, that you, on a click of a button, all your processes start. But on the background, it takes a lot many more efforts to do that, because some of those applications might be moving from one department to another, to third, to fourth, before it comes back to you after getting processed that yes, this your application is approved. And that requires, and that is what is we are working with when we are working with digitization. We are trying to, interlink these different departments on the background, and that takes time, that takes effort. And that is where you need to start. And it looks like a small work, honestly. Developing an app is the simplest form of thing to do. But the process that goes behind developing the processes for the app or systems for the app is what is more complicated. That will take you years before the app can be developed in 5 months, 6 months.
Nice, man. Well, I'm glad a guy like you is on the case for us.
Yeah, hi. So I don't have a proper question to this, but I just want to add to what Gautam was trying to say, and how you try to give an answer, because I'm sure nobody does for this. But even I was brainstorming, saying, how about a law for not doing that, but not that police catches us for breaking the signal and we care. Although we do, because we don't want to spend $2,000, but in the end we do break the signal if we get a chance. So not that policing is going to make a change, saying don't throw your garbage into the dustbin or you're going to be fined. Whereas I've heard of case studies from the foreign countries as well, where when this kind of policing is done, there is a behavioral change. But then I'm also taken back to the first point that Punit mentioned, saying if there isn't a will, nobody's going to do it. It's a behavioral change that comes here. And all these years, I've just thought of environmental change being a mindset thing. And I'm one of those who needs to be made understood a climate change concept as I'm a 5-year-old, because I myself am a layman. I'm trying to learn about it a lot more, because I see that the change is hampering us big time. And from a 60-year-old to a 20-year-old, while I've discussed this problem to people, they're like natural resource. We've gotten this as like, a heritage from somebody. So it's ours to use. And that things are going to happen. Things will fall apart. And like Puneet said, until unless the disaster happens, nobody gets up. And that's the problem with building an awareness. So I'm glad that there's something like CPIN working on making people aware about it. But there's something very strong needed to actually bring that change. And of course, it starts with one person. And there's every drop makes a sea, a very famous thing in Hindi, a quote in Hindi. So yeah, I'm glad about this initiative. But when I start thinking, it's like we've talked a lot about it. How about we bring a change? And I don't see the community coming together for it. I mean, even today with Assam's disaster, or even till date, I mean, it's the rainy season in India and it's raining badly. Still, the roads are filling up, and you see your packet that you threw on the road going in the water, in the flood around your area, and you don't realize, and you're like, "Arey, this is the government doing. The drainage systems are not proper," and there's this blame game going on. And I don't know if I speak for the other countries, but this is the human mindset going on, and it's disturbing. Yeah.
I agree with her, and it's and see, I do get it, but sorry, Anika, I think a lot of our conversations are getting too India centric over here, per se. But when you look at it from India's community perspective, bringing in laws are not always helpful. We or somewhere every one of Indian takes pride in, oh, how did I break the law? You know, now that's not the best thing to do, right? So you bring in a law, people will do it because, oh, I can break it in this many ways, which is much more fun than doing something which can actually help. Okay, but at the same time, we also have a mindset of peer pressure. Can you develop these things as peer pressure? Then see how many people will take it up. Then see how many people will, oh, no. That person in my community is doing, so I also have to. It's not the traditional way, but when you have to think at it from what solution needs to be created around you, it needs to be thought on that localized lines. It needs to be thought from those contexts that how can we develop something which can actually be implemented over here. One part of everything is that what is the solution? And you might be able to find the solution as well. But most of the things fail at implementation. And that is the core crux of developing this whole thing as well, that can we try to focus it more on implementation? I'm not saying that everything will be implementation, but I'm thinking that maybe even if 10% is more implementation oriented, we might be at a better stage than where we are right now. And that's the idea. That's where we want to go towards. And now that's the thought process, at least I have, that let's try to at least nudge that thing.
Punit, I'd love to say something. First of all, I don't mind that this is very India-centric. First of all, you work for the government of India. Based on the time that we're hosting this, I'm in Poland, it's 12:30 here, but there's many participants in India. But I do want to say, I'm listening, I think this is very interesting. I think this very meeting is a great example of, we're just talking, but there is a value to talk as well. And I'm cultivating this global network, of so-called walkability correspondence. And I think sometimes if there is confusion from people about the actions we're taking, I always emphasize media is the action. Media is about shaping awareness and raising the discourse globally. I am starting to see in this global network local synergies develop. For example, the India group, which several of the people in the India correspondence. So for me, this is like one of the most exciting things. People could say, oh, all you're doing in this network is talking across borders, but no, there's also local synergies developing. Not to mention there's a value in talk. If we don't know what's going on, we don't know how to help. And I think it's really interesting. Everybody's bringing something really interesting and valuable to the table. I loved what Urmi said about the household effect. And this is where public service announcements, public education about how our individual behavior affects, these global issues and our communities is really important. Also examining, the responsibility of the municipality. But the way I see it is we cannot have change with just community action or just citizen action or just municipal action. We need change across the spectrum. We're in a planetary, actually kind of a planetary very hot situation, which we're all, many of us at least, are experiencing at a local level if you're paying attention. So we need deep cooperation across the spectrum. And personally, I feel that rather than, it's important to know if your government is stepping up to the plate or not. I think it's important to know if your neighbors maybe could use a little bit of help, maybe if you a tip or two about recycling or whatever. However, I think going beyond looking at our government and saying they're not doing enough, my neighbor's not doing enough, we need to also look at ourselves. If we have an idea, like Gautam had an idea, I think that's where it starts. I have an idea. How can this be implemented? And then, for example, connecting with Punit, your team is developing this compendium of community-led initiatives on climate change, and no doubt might even lead to community groups in the same exact area who were not cooperating before suddenly connecting, which I'm starting to see in this global network with individual citizens. It begins with that, I believe. So I think everybody here is saying things that are all important when you fit the puzzle together of the real cooperation we need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super important, and that is the reason. Like sometimes, while I'm developing this network, I think we also got in touch for the same reason, that how can we develop some networks on the lines, and someone far away can help me and support me in developing it based on the ideas that they have, because the thought process somewhere is similar. It's not too different, but it's just that the implementation might change a bit. Implementation might change based on the context. And that is what something that we need to recognize, that it's not that the problem is new. Problem has always been there. It's how do you think about its solution and its implementation that changes from place to place. And that's what we need to understand. And sometimes we might feel that, okay, they are doing it in this way, and they can, some other country can do it in this way. Why can't India? Because our context is different. But what can we learn from them is more important. That, okay, they are doing this, and this is why they are successful. If we want to do all these things here in our country, what do we need to be successful? So then it's easier to tweak those small patterns to be able to, come to the point and come to the solution. And somewhere that's the whole idea about the CPIN as a network as well, that everyone who's working on that particular field might have faced that problem, might have developed a solution on their own as well. But there are several other people who want to start off something on those lines. Can we make sure that they have enough support before they start, so that they don't feel scared? They can go forward. They can make sure that there is enough things that they can do, experiment with. And they will also have to change and reiterate things. But at least they know the way forward. It's not a copy-paste solution. It's more on the lines of, how do you apply it in a better way for your context?
Yeah, exactly. Do we have more questions? As we're waiting, I appreciate what you say, Punit, and what really excites me, kind of at the heart of pedestrian space, is welcoming all those voices, the individual. So we talk about walkability and mobility choice at pedestrian space. I want to talk about our individual mobility choice. Even those who are car dependent. We have many people in our network who are car dependent, not by choice, but because no valid alternative exists. So talking about that individual, talking about the local community, talking about more broadly national issues, what's the paradigm, and then getting also into this global discourse. And for me, all of it is extremely necessary. The individual, the grassroots, the community, the municipal. I need to have all those voices represented at the platform. So I think it's really interesting hearing from you. And yeah.
And I like to bring in one more point. I think this is because this is a pedestrian space. When we, as a framework, trying to look at it from mobility perspective, cities do understand, or national level at least does understand on the lines that non-motorized transport is an important part of the whole process of change, as well as public transport. That how can you develop infrastructure for the same so that people have option to do this? Somewhere you have to give them option before you like, okay, why are people not using these things? But they need to have enough options. They need to have access to those things in a better way. That recognition is there. How much of implementation happens depends on case to case. But so while a place like Delhi has excellent public transport, but your non-motorized transport is not too good. They do understand the intent of last mile connectivity and how that will support, that can be supported by it. But implementing it is much more difficult per se, because where do you get that space? How do you get that space? And how do you take it forward is something which is a bigger challenge. And this is what it is, that it will change at every aspect junction. But how do you make sure that it can be followed? Because we don't have, and we can't even have as systemized plans that most of the developed worlds have. But how can we make sure that whatever we have can be more streamlined per se, that there is a better access to things? So that is something that we do need to recognize and maybe work towards that.
One thing that could be interesting, and I think this is where it becomes really interesting to have that global discourse and to meet people in other places working on issues. For example, I don't know if Delhi has, it seems like it doesn't, but I'm starting to see more and more cities have pedestrian plans. So they have cities or nations developing walking strategies. And this is happening. We have actually a few people in our network that are working on plans for their cities or nations on walking. So this could be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so Delhi does not have a walkability plan per se, but Delhi does have a master plan that our organization, National Institute of Urban Affairs, only worked on, and it's for the, I think, 2041 that they worked on, that how should Delhi look like at that point of time. And do you want to take screenshots first? We can, so that.
Yeah, actually, if everybody wouldn't mind,
Yeah,
really quick, turning on your, oh, Gautam's gone. Yeah, maybe really quick before everybody starts to go. Thanks, everybody. All right, back to you, Punit.
yeah. So Delhi has a master plan, and India promotes development of master plans more often than anything else for each city, so that they have an understanding of how they are going to grow, where they will grow, and what are the avenues they need to look into for development. Not just from infrastructure point of view, but also from different perspectives, economic and demographic and everything as well. So yes, that being said, it might be interesting, but then again, that might be taken up by a lot of various actors. And one thing that I don't know how this is possible. So a lot of NGOs do these kind of works that kind of promote child-friendly cities, or let's say safe spaces or public spaces for children, or just better, walkways or cycle tracks or something in the cities. A lot of organizations individually promote these kind of things over here, which has taken up a lot of interest. Slowly, it's increasing. I'm not sure what is the right solution and how it can be developed over here, because the complexity of urban systems in India is immense, and I'm not sure how complex it is in other countries, because to be honest, for me as well, urban as a focus came only 3.5 years ago. So I'm still learning every day what are the things possible, how are they possible, and what can be done. And what is the boundary conditions to define those things? Because unless and until you have those, you might not be able to give out exact solutions. but I'm sure that NGOs might be able to present such kind of things in a better way and kind of lobby for that as well, so that more and more governmental departments can take these things up. And that is generally one way I've seen as a good way forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have more questions? I like Richuparna's comment that community spirit is key. She mentions, maybe you need to pronounce it, Punit. The Asia's cleanest village is, how do you pronounce that, Meghalaya?
Yeah, Meghalaya.
Meghalaya, India. We can always learn from them. Yeah, I strongly believe this is true. If we need examples of something, it likely exists somewhere. I really believe that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
People have already faced that problem and people have already tried to solve it. We need to just find who is it, where is it.
Mhm. So if there's, as we wait and see if there's more questions, is there anything more you'd like to share? Any, I know your network is open to anybody who would like to participate. I don't know if you want to put kind of an invite to participate out there for anyone listening who's interested.
Yes, I will surely put down the link to the network so that you can know more about it and then join it as well. Just so yeah, this is the network, and the idea is eventually, yeah, communications is one of the interesting things that we can take up, and that's where you can also check out the podcast. I think I'll put the link to that as well. If you're interested in climate change and the urban development sector, this will surely be interesting.
I saw your recent podcast. I believe that was it focus on the effect of climate change on slums?
Yes, yes. It's
Right.
on, so how can urban poor be catered to with climate change? And Bijal Brahmat is quite a renowned activist in India, as well as leads an NGO called Gujarat Mahila Housing Seva Trust. She has been working with slums for a long amount of time, and she has been helping now government also develop ways in which that, so government has a scheme called affordable housing, which kind of facilitates the whole process of urban poor being able to get a place where they can live affordably, with not in dangerous areas, because slums generally come up in areas where no one is inhabiting that place, and that might already be risk prone. And generally they are on the banks of the river or near the railway lines or things like that. So how can those things be taken into account while developing the affordable housing? What all things slums are doing right now which can be taken into account, things like that.
Right. I mean, I immediately see that in the bigger picture as well, with other nations who are facing similar issues. Well, climate change is going to affect everyone, but yes, how specifically the urban poor are affected in many other nations as well. I know this is a really serious topic and connects as well to issues of climate migration, which I'm hoping to increasingly focus on that pedestrian space right now, and people that are working to identify how we handle climate migration. So very interesting. I look forward to listening.
Yeah, and so there is one more topic, two actually more conversations I've had. One is specifically on climate migration, and where I spoke to someone who has been working now on migration in general, and then we discussed more about how climate change affects the whole pattern. And another was on gig economy. So India has a huge rise in gig economy right now, with all the kinds of delivery apps coming into picture, all different kinds of apps that is facilitating services at super fast pace and network as well. And in that, we are discussing how are the ways that we can actually stop people from migrating from rural to urban area with digitization coming into place. So that was, I think, in the first season. So it might be in the first 10 episodes. There is episode on gig economy with Dinesh Goyal, and the climate migration was in the second season with Rushil, and that guy has a Bandhu urban tech startup. It's incubated in MIT, and he has been working in the Indian context for the same.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see a lot of, you're dropping some great links, and I will include those when I publish this. I will ask one last time. We're going to close up here soon. Does anybody have any final questions or comments to share? Okay, I want to thank everybody who's here for participating, and thank you very much, Punit, for your time.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Anika, for inviting me for this roundtable. It was amazing talking to you and everyone for super exciting and interesting questions.
Yeah, I think so. I really look forward to having you again as a roundtable guest, maybe a panel. Maybe we can put together a panel.
Yes.
That would be really interesting. So
yes, that would
yeah, until next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.